For this final portion of our online lecture regarding sexuality in close relationships, I want to take a little bit of time to provide you with some detailed information about how you talk to children about sex. And these are guidelines that are provided by the American Academy of Pediatrics for parents. So these are guidelines that you can use when you're working with parents to help them understand how to talk to children about sex in an age-appropriate way. And so what we've done on this slide is we've created a nice visual that shows you some typical questions that children might ask, what the child may ask and want to know at a particular age, and what the child should know at a particular age. And again, this is a very specific developmental approach that's age appropriate, and it's endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So let's begin with a discussion of what's going on for kids in the preschool years. And this is what we have on this slide. So let's start with very young children. So these are toddlers that are beginning to talk. They're excitedly learning about the world around them. They ask a lot of questions. They point. They want to know what things are. They want to understand how things work. And this also applies, this natural and healthy curiosity will also apply to their own bodies. So when answering children's questions at this age, pediatricians recommend the following. First, they want parents to know that there are some pretty typical questions that you see young children asking at this age. So a young child may ask, "How did I get in your tummy?" They may ask, "Where was I before I got in your tummy?" "How did I get out?" They have lots of questions, and the more curious and creative and smart your child is, the more questions they're going to have. Where do babies come from? And how come girls don't have a penis? So these are fairly typical questions that you will hear young children asking. They often are asking these questions too in response to seeing a younger sibling, being in the tub together, or maybe they've seen their parent without clothes on, or perhaps their mom is pregnant again. And this is when you get a lot of curiosity and questions about how this all is happening. Parents often feel very anxious when presented with these questions, and they're not quite sure how to respond when children ask these questions. They know they should be the ones providing the answers, but the children just seem so young. And so parents often find themselves feeling anxious or acting awkward in these situations. And so what pediatricians want parents to understand is that this is not some sort of pathology on the part of their child. This is just a really interested and curious child who's just asking questions about the world around them, just like they want to know why the grass turns brown in the winter, or why the sun sets, or how rain is formed, etc. So if you look specifically between 18 months to 3 years of age, what pediatricians want parents to know is that children will begin, during this period of time, they're really beginning to learn about their own body. And it's really important for parents to teach their children the proper names for their body parts. Making up names for body parts may give the idea to children that there's something bad about their body part or something strange. So children don't have the cognitive capability when parents are feeling awkward to understand that that's about their parents' anxiety. They can't figure that out in their head. They just know mommy or daddy is having a really weird reaction to what they think is just kind of an innocent question. So they encourage parents just to very calmly provide the correct names for the children's body parts, just as you're telling them it's their nose and their eyes and their ears. You give them the correct names for their body parts as well. Also, this is a time when you begin teaching children which parts of their body are private. This is just a beginning step in teaching safety to kids in a way that doesn't scare them. So as you're teaching them about their body, you teach them the correct names, and then you can tell them those are your private parts. And they may say, "Well, what do you mean?" And you can just very simply say, "The parts of your body that are covered by your bathing suit are private parts." And that's the way you can very simply answer that for children. Now, when you get to ages 4 to 5 years old, the questions that children begin to ask become a little bit more complicated. You have kids now that are in preschool, they're in kindergarten, they may have older siblings, they may be around older kids. So sometimes their questions become a little bit more complex. And basically what's happening for kids at this age is they're having an increased level of understanding. And some of the issues that come up for the kids at this age, because they're exposed to older kids or around older kids, is they may ask, how old do girls have to be before they can have a baby? So they may be wondering, how old does a girl have to be before she can have a baby? They may ask, what is a period? 5-year-olds, children who are beginning school may ask, what's sex? What is that? Why do people do that? Is that real? They may ask why some men like other men or why some women like other women. They may ask, why do boys get erections? They might not use that language, but they may want to know why their penis gets hard. So they have these sorts of normal and healthy questions that, again, tend to kind of rock parents and stop them in their tracks. And again, pediatricians want parents to know that this is normal, it's healthy. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your child. It simply means that they have an increased understanding of their bodies, and it also means that they are most likely being exposed to more by being in school and being around older kids. So at 5 to 7 years of age, what pediatricians recommend is that parents are very aware that their children are beginning to learn much more about how people get along with each other. So we're talking about kids that are in kindergarten, age 7, they're in first grade. Children may become interested in what takes place sexually between adults. They may wonder, what is sex exactly? Their questions will become more complex as they try to understand the connection between sexuality and making babies. So for many kids, they understand that sex takes place to make a baby, and they're beginning to figure that out at this age. And then they want to understand, perhaps if they see someone who is not married and is pregnant, they might have questions about how did that person get pregnant, depending on how the parents have explained sex to them. They may come up with their own explanations for how a body works and where babies come from. So kids, if parents fail to tell children or answer their questions in a way that's age appropriate, kids are very often going to come up with their own answers, or they're going to talk to each other, or they're going to hear things. And they may even feel afraid. They may hear things from someone at preschool about a baby that was born via cesarean section, and maybe that sounds kind of scary. So they need their parents to help answer their questions about these issues. They are very likely, even at 4 or 5, to turn to their friends for answers if their parents don't tell them in a way that's appropriate. So pediatricians want parents to know that it's really important to help your child understand sexuality in a healthy way, and that the lessons and values they learn at this age will stay with them as they become an adult. So as children approach school age, and as they become exposed to older school-age children, it's really important that they know the proper names of their body parts, that they understand the functions of each, and that they understand the physical differences between boys and girls. As children's sexual awareness continues to develop, it is not unusual for children to begin experimenting with masturbation. And what we have to help parents understand is that masturbation in a child means something very different than masturbation in an adult. So masturbation is a normal part of childhood sexuality that many parents find difficult to discuss. Up to the age of 5 or 6, it's quite common. Around the age of 6, children become much more socially aware about their bodies, and they begin to feel embarrassed about touching themselves in public. Prior to that time, parents often are pulling their children's hands and say, no, don't do that, when they're riding in the cart at Target. But around 6, they begin to feel more embarrassed about touching themselves. So it's important for parents to make sure that their child understands that masturbation or touching one's genitals is a private activity. It's not a public one. There are times that parents should be aware of that frequent masturbation in a young child can point to a problem, but this is relatively rare, and it would be in a situation where it's very frequent, to the point where it's hindering a child's ability to interact with others. And this sort of excessive masturbation in a young child could be a sign that a child is under a lot of stress. So excessive masturbation in young children can be a sign of a lot of stress, or it could mean that they're not receiving enough attention at home. In very rare instances, it could be a tip-off to sexual abuse, but it's most often a sign of stress or the sign of self-soothing that a child is not experiencing the care that they need at home. Some sexually abused children do become overly interested in their own sexuality. So what we encourage parents to do is if they have a concern about this for their excessive masturbation in their child, they really should talk to their pediatrician about it. But for most children, masturbation is nothing to worry about, and it's normal. So the prior slide really addressed how to talk to very young children. And we know that pediatricians recommend that parents answer their young children's questions about sex in a very kind of brief, age-appropriate way, and that they understand the types of questions that young children may ask. Pediatricians recommend for younger children as they hit this 4, 5, 6 years old, that children understand that an interest in their genitals is healthy and natural, that nudity and sexual play in public are not okay. You're beginning to teach children kind of social norms for privacy. And again, the emphasis on what parts of your body are private parts, those parts that are covered by a bathing suit. Parents should begin a conversation with children in a way that doesn't scare them, but that teaches them about sexual safety, that no other person, including even a close friend or relative, may touch their private parts. And this is a message that you begin giving children in a very safe and age-appropriate way when they're young. And you teach them that no other person may touch their private parts. The exceptions are the doctors or nurses during an exam, and they're just making sure their body's developing okay, or their own parents when they're trying to help them with a bath or take care of any pain that they might have in that area. So when we get into the 5 to 7 year age range, I've already kind of gone over these questions that kids begin asking as they're really exposed to a lot more in elementary school. So they're typically going to ask these questions that are more relationship focused that you see in the first row on the slide. So again, in the 5 to 7 year age range, children are really starting to try to understand relationships. This is not just about sexual relationships. Kids at this age are also trying to understand friendship. They're learning a lot about what it means to be a good friend and what it means to be kind. And they're learning about bullying at school. So they're beginning to become interested in social relationships, not just understanding sexual relationships. It's very normative for this age group. At 8 or 9 years of age, children probably have already developed a pretty keen sense of right and wrong. They are able to, at 8 or 9, they are able to understand that sex is something that happens between two people who love each other. They may begin to become interested in how their mom and dad met and fell in love. So they might become interested in romance and how does that happen and how do people meet and fall in love. They may begin asking questions about romance and falling in love and marriage. They also may ask about homosexual relationships. And this is a time where you can begin having discussions with your children about your own values about romance and sexuality and marriage and homosexual relationships. And what pediatricians encourage parents to do is to explain to their children that liking or loving someone does not depend on the person's gender, and that it's different from liking someone sexually. So kids are beginning to sort this out. What does it mean to like someone? What does it mean to love someone? But then what does it mean to have a romantic or sexual interest in someone? And kids really are starting to grapple with this at 8 or 9. And parents are often surprised by this. Now, at this age, children will begin going through many changes as they begin to enter, some, particularly girls, begin to enter puberty. As children become more and more aware of their own sexuality, it's very important that parents have talks with their children about the importance of delaying sexual intercourse until they are older. So parents are encouraged to have conversations with children about the difference between physical readiness. Remember, these kids are often asking, how old does a girl have to be before she can have a baby? Or how old does a boy have to be before he can make a baby? So it's really an important time, and the 8 or 9 age range creates an opportunity where you can talk to kids about the difference between kind of biological maturity and physical maturity or physical readiness for making a baby, and the responsibility of actually having a baby and what it means to be a parent. And in that same conversation, it's very important that you have a conversation with your child about the importance of waiting to have sexual intercourse until you are older. This also creates a segue into beginning a conversation about what people do to protect themselves from having a baby. Pediatricians also suggest that parents should mention contraception to kids even at this young age. And it's very often done in a pretty simple, benign, age-appropriate way where a child often asks questions, well, what does somebody do if you are in love and you are married and you don't feel like you're ready to have a baby yet? And then the parent can very simply answer that question and say, well, there's something that's called contraception, and it's something that the man or the woman can use to prevent a baby being made. And that's very often all they need to hear. They don't even necessarily need much more detail at that point. They may ask more questions, and if they ask more questions, you provide more answers, but you go based on the child's lead. Pediatricians also feel that it's really important that parents address sexually transmitted diseases at this age, particularly the 8 or 9-year-olds, and that they should be sure that children understand that just as there are colds and flus and viruses that get passed back and forth and people get sick, that there are also diseases that people can get through having sex, and that there are things that people need to do to keep themselves sexually healthy. And this is a very simple way to begin that conversation. So pediatricians really emphasize here that parents have an opportunity, and the opportunity they have is to teach their children to be sexually responsible, and that is one of the most important lessons that they can provide with their child regarding their sexual health. As children approach puberty, so this very last row, what is it important that children know? And this is often a surprise to parents because they think, well, can't I just wait and tell them afterwards? But pediatricians really feel that children need to know this information as they're approaching puberty, not in a whole lot of detail, not conversation after conversation, but just in a way that explains what is going on. And so here's what they feel that parents need to be sure that their children know. Children need to know their body parts, the names for them, how they're related to sex and sexual functions. Children need to understand how babies are conceived and born, and this is specifically. Children need to understand puberty and how their body will change. Kids want to know. They want to know. They see it happening in the older children at school. They don't quite know what's going on. And parents can get information where they can then share with children very specifically, this is typically what happens first, and then this is what happens next, and then this will happen. Menstruation. Both boys and girls can benefit from knowing about menstruation. We don't want kids to feel afraid of natural things that are going to happen in their bodies. And sometimes children at school may see that a girl has gotten her period and they may feel afraid. They see blood, they think someone's terribly hurt, and they feel afraid. So it's important that they just know what's normal. They should know what sexual intercourse is. They should know about contraception and birth control. They should understand that there are sexually transmitted diseases, and they should understand how they get spread. They should know about masturbation. They should know about homosexuality. And they should also, regarding all of these issues, they should know their parents' personal personal values and beliefs that they hold about all of these issues. So family and personal guidelines are really important for parents to instill in their children at this time that they're talking to them about sex. All right, that's where we're going to stop today in terms of our developmental approach to some specifics provided by pediatricians for how to talk to kids.